got done talking to Jeff Dickerson from ESPN 1000 in Chicago, and he said, realistically, this season, the Bears did not have a lot of buzz. There was not a lot of people talking about them. They're kind of an afterthought. It helps that the Cubs are doing so well, but is there something that is sneaky or scary about this Bears team, or do all the people here in Philly who seem to think that, the Eagles can win this road game, do they have a point?
Well, Chicago they looked great last week against Houston, but their defense played a lot better than people think they did. Their cornerbacks are actually pretty strong. Cutler is who he is, which, Chicago fans will tell you that if good Cutler shows up, you're really happy, but bad Cutler can show up a lot of times. But good Cutler has been showing up more of late the last couple of years. So I think Chicago's the sort of team to where if they stay healthy and get a couple bounces, they could be, they could be a number 6 team in a wild card playoff. I think they have that kind of potential. But, more too often than not, they're not going to be there. But I think they've got that kind of potential. So, yeah, it's a scary matchup.
All right, let's look at some of the matchups here. Now that the dust is settled on this one, we know Zach Ertz will miss the game. Leotis McKelvin will also miss the game. How does that affect Philadelphia tonight?
The McKelvin injury is worse, I think, than the Ertz injury because McKelvin could stop Jeffrey, and Jeffrey's over. If you look at his metrics over the past couple of years, he's more of a volume guy than a quality guy. In other words, he gets a lot of passes thrown his way, and he gets puts up he gets prolific numbers, but on a per catch basis or per target basis, his numbers don't generally tend to be elite. So when you put a guy like McKelvin's on the top of his game. McKelvin's terrific, but things aren't quite as good when you start getting to the Eagles' backups and things, and I think they'll try and rotate Jeffrey around to get him matched up against a lot of different people. So it's the sort of thing to where you're hoping that he just has one of those games where he catches a lot of passes and doesn't hit maybe a big pass, because you can deal with 10 for 80 but not 10 for 180.
Yeah, and then, of course, you look at the wide receivers from the Bears, those guys are big play guys. Alshon Jeffries is a guy, that is, I don't want to say an elite player, but he's right on that next level, possibly, of that top-tier wide receiver in the league. And then Eddie Royal, steady as she goes. And then the wild card out there, Kevin White, the number 7 overall pick in last year's draft. They have some talent at that spot where the Eagles are only going to roll with 3 corners tonight, Casey.
Yeah, they are. And here's the thing, though. If I'm Chicago, what I am a little worried about is Jay Cutler over the past few years he's done, over his whole career for the most part, he's done very poorly in a metric I have called bad decision rate. Measures so often a quarterback makes a mental error that leads to a turnover opportunity for the opposing team. And he used to be the poster child for just horrible performance in that metric. Last couple of years he's gotten a lot better, but looking at what he played last week, I think he might see all those targets and say, hey, I've got these great receivers, and boy, I can put the ball up and a lot more often. And I think he's starting to take more chances than he used to. So I'm Philadelphia. I might be thinking, this isn't a day I try to cover people well and try and keep them from getting passes, but I try and see if I can get Cutler to take some chances that he wouldn't, he hasn't been taking the last couple of years. Because if that's the case, don't be surprised if the Eagles pick up a couple, 3 passes tonight.
I'm interested to get your take on the Bears' offensive line against this Eagles front 4 here, where, the Eagles don't like to blitz a whole heck of a lot. But is this a team, this Bears team, do you need to blitz against them?
No, I think if you do the mix-up in coverages, I think that's more of a – you want to get some pressure in Cutler's face, because if he gets pass rush pressure, that does make him force more passes. But if you just sit back there and give him – because what he'll do, I wouldn't be surprised to see this happen a couple of times tonight. Give him some dink and dunk throws. He'll take him. But Cutler, after he throws a few of those, he's like a fastball pitcher. He wants to throw the home run ball. So you give him a few of those and then sit back in coverages and try and mix some things up and give him things that he thinks he has that aren't there. If you play some mixing in coverages, I think you get him to force the passes. So this is one of those nights where I don't think they try and shut people down. I think you try and just sit back in coverages and get Cutler to make some mistakes.
Casey Joyner's with us, taking a look at some of the key matchups tonight. Another spot here is the Bears' running game. Jeremy Langford takes over for Forte. Forte had a monster game the other night. Who has 30 carries in the league anymore? Well, it's Matt Forte. The Bears thought he was done, and they saw enough from Langford last year, I think, to kind of push Forte out the door. How can they utilize Langford tonight?
Well, here's the thing. Langford ranked last in the league last year in a metric I have called good blocking yards per attempt. It measures how productive a back is when you give him quality run blocking. It's really important to do well in that metric because backs are generally 5 times as productive when they get good blocking as they are when they don't get good blocking. So Langford's not a home run hitter, and Chicago last week ranked 16th in the league in good blocking rate, meaning how often they gave their ball carriers good blocking. And add that to the way Philadelphia's run defense played last week, I think Chicago's not going to be able to lean on their ground game, or if they are, they're only going to be able to lean on the ground game for 4 or 5 yard gains. I don't think they're going to be hitting any home runs, and if they want to get in some big plays, they're going to have to go by that pass game we talked about.
Casey, also, the Jay Cutler factor here. He's a guy that in the first half against Houston, he played really well. In the second half against the Texans, different story. It's always the tale of which Cutler will show up here, but you wonder at home where the Bears were 1-7 last year, is Jay Cutler just a guy who right now is not the same play? I mean, he has been so polarizing, so up and down, but is he on the back end of his career here?
I think he's on the back of his career. I'm curious if, you look at John Fox's history. John Fox used to have Jake Delhomme, and he let Delhomme take a ton of chances. Delhomme was bad, and was rated poor in that bad decision rate metric as well, but Delhomme would hit a lot of big plays. So you got to wonder if they're going to let Cutler do that. But at the same time, if you let Cutler do that, how many chances are too many chances? Because Cutler's the kind of guy, I'm telling you, he would put up bad decision rate numbers that were just, the rest of the league would be at one level for a couple of seasons, and then he'd be at this completely different level. Like, that's how bad he was. I mean, I almost named the metric after him. He was so bad at it. So he was. He really did. It was... and if he plays that, how many chances is John Fox going to let him take? Because again, I don't think they can lean on the running game. And do they want to get into a shootout game and put Carson Wentz into a position where he's got to throw the ball a lot? Because the one thing is, if you can turn the game into that type of situation, now maybe you get Wentz to play the type of game you want him to play. That can be another factor in how their offense approaches this.
Yeah, they had a tough time against a very good Texans defense last week. They did not have any drives of more than 10 plays. They had a tough time moving the chains here. How would you rate this Bears offense? I mean, is this an offense that would be, a top half of the league?
Top half, yeah, but I wouldn't give it top 10. I'd be aiming at about 16, 14, somewhere around there. They've got the potential, but if Langford can't, if what he did last year in good blocking yards per attempt and what he did last week, because he didn't do any better last week than he did last year, if what he is in that metric is with the kind of back that he is, you don't have a home run hitter. All you've got is a plodding lead back. And if you get a plodding lead back, you can have all the great receivers that you want. It caps how far your offense can go. And plus, again, I still wonder how much are they going to trust Cutler? Because, man, they're going to, there's a certain level to which you let him go. But if you start seeing him making those bad decisions, you immediately think, well, he's going to go back to where he was. And as risky as John Fox will be on offense, I think that he won't. I don't think he'll let Cutler be what Jake Delhomme was 4 years back.
Want to get your take on the Eagles' defense here. Fletcher Cox is a guy who can be a problem, but the Bears are pretty good in the interior of that line. And then you look at the ends. Curry, Graham, Barwin. Are the ends of the Eagles the spot where they have a clear advantage?
Yeah, they are. And also last week, and I know it's Cleveland, and Cleveland's not exactly a powerhouse team, to put it kindly. They might be the worst team in the league. But last week, Cleveland's offensive line only gave its ball carriers good blocking on 4 plays prior to that last drive of the game, where Philadelphia was sitting back in prevent defense, and they ran some draws against that. Before that, it was only 4 good blocking plays. So Philadelphia's front seven was disrupting the ground game. And again, Chicago was only 16th last week in good blocking rate. And again, that's against a very good Houston defense, but Chicago's offense is only 16th, so that's mid-tier. So if they're not going to get their ball carriers good blocking very often, and you're not getting home runs from Langford, again, it gets away from, okay, if I'm Philadelphia, it might be a situation where, hey, I can rely on my front seven to go ahead and stop the run, and I can just sit back and start playing coverages, and they, again, get in that situation where we've got Cutler going after things. And I think, yeah, they could get some kind of a pass rush against Cutler, too, without having to bring extra people.
All right, Casey, Carson Wentz admitted this week, so did Jason Kelce, that they had some communication breakdowns in the pass coverage. That's against the Browns. If that happens tonight, are the Bears better equipped to take advantage of Carson Wentz?
Yeah, they are. I would be concerned if I'm the Eagles because as far as coverage goes, because Chicago's got some very good cornerbacks. Last week, Tracy Porter, he faced DeAndre Hopkins on 10 plays. He only allowed 4 completions for about 40 yards, and they got a pass interference penalty as well. So if he's able to take out DeAndre Hopkins, you could say Porter could go against anybody in the Eagles and shut them down completely. So I'm worried about that from that perspective. I think this is going to be a game where the Eagles can't decide we're going to go for matchup situations. We're going to go man-on-man situations. If you get man-on-man situations, you better run some picks. You better run in some formations that allow your receivers to get free. Because if you're just trying to count on your receivers to beat the secondary one-on-one, I don't think it happens.
Yeah, and you look at the fact that the Eagles secondary, as we said, only going with the three guys, Jalen Mills, a seventh-rounder, Ron Brooks, and Nolan Carroll. They're not oozing with talent there, so that's a spot where the Bears can certainly go after. But on the flip side here, Carson Wentz, last week, what he was able to do so well was to really see some things, and I thought played well between the ears. He played a good game between the ears and made some really good throws. But, the running game with Ryan Matthews, that's something that Doug Peterson talked about this week. They want to feed him the ball some more. Can the Bears be had on the ground?
Well, Houston ranked 23rd last week in good blocking rate. Again, it's only 1 week measurement. Their offensive line is better than that, and they didn't do very well in good blocking yards per attempt. So all in all, they didn't move the ball very well against Chicago's defense. So it is a concern that if Houston, which I think probably has I don't know if I'd say better, but at least a comparable talent-wise offensive line to Philadelphia. If they couldn't move the ball last week, I don't know that Philadelphia's going to move the ball loud on the ground. So it might be one of those situations where, again, I think that might be when the game pans out too. Is Philadelphia tries to run the ball to keep the pressure away from Wentz, and Chicago tries to run the ball so that they can get that game going, maybe able to fix the pass game. Which team decides to go aerial first because whoever wins the passing game, I think, is going to win this game.
All right, Tacey, we'll get your pick on this game in just a little bit. I want to get your take on some of the other matchups from week number 2 in the NFL, starting with Dallas and Washington. A lot of gripes in the locker room in Washington. Sounds like there's some things happening down there. People disappointed in Cousins. What are you seeing from Kirk Cousins right now?
Kirk Cousins, we talked about the bad decision rate metric earlier, and 2 years ago, Cousins was 33rd in the league in bad decision rate, and last year he was tied for 12th, so he made a lot of improvements. But in bad decision rate, if you make one bad decision per game, if you have that kind of pace, and you end up the year with 16 bad decisions, you'll be at or near the bottom of the league in that category. Cousins has made 2 so far this year, and it's 1 in each game. So he's taking chances, he's taking risk. I think too much is being put on him because, he made a bad decision, and it was a very costly time to make a bad decision, but I think they're putting too much on him. But I think Washington also thought, and this is why they didn't go with him long term, he's a dink and dunk passer, really good dink and dunk passer, but he can't get things done on vertical passes. And if you can't get things done on vertical passes, you won't stay a starting quarterback. And I think his teammates are realizing maybe he can't get that part of the game done. If that's the case, Washington's got some long-term issues.
Hey, how about Dallas? Week 1, I thought they could have done a better job in the game plan, running the ball more, getting behind that line. 30-30 was the split the other day. What impressed you about the Cowboys?
Just wrote about this for ESPN's Insider section. I do fantasy football for them, and we're writing about Adrian Peterson and Todd Gurley, whether it's time to buy or sell. But I also covered the Cowboys triplets, and one of the things we covered was about Elliott, and is he, what's going on with him? Is he's played well but not fantastic? Good news is the Cowboys have a higher good blocking rate this year, which is how often they give the ball carriers quality run blocking, a higher good blocking rate this year than they did last year. And Elliott's problems are more. He sometimes runs ahead of his blockers. So, they're doing a pulling play, and he runs ahead of it. So there's a guard's pulling, and he tries to get in front of the guard before the guard, gets out there, or he doesn't go fast enough. He's just got to learn the pace of how the offense is going. I think Elliott would be just fine. And when it comes to Bryant and Dak Prescott, Bryant's had 4 stretch vertical passes thrown his way this year, stretch vertical 20 or more yards downfield. That's a low number for him, and he hasn't caught any of them. And Prescott's only thrown 5 of those. So I think both of those numbers are going to improve. So I think you're going to see Elliott get better and Prescott and Bryant get better. So that says something for where the Cowboys are going to end up this year.
All right. How about the Giants yesterday? Many people thought this team's offense would be carrying them to wins. Those 2 teams scored over 100 points last year. Yesterday, not the case. But what is impressing you about the Giants that make you think that maybe they're for real?
Their offense is going to get better. They've got too much talent on offense to not be better. Sterling Shepard's playing really well. Beckham is not. That's not done. Did you win a couple games and you don't have Beckham playing well at all, or at least not to where he was in past years? That's really good. Eli's protecting the ball. I think their running game is going to get better. The run defense has played well. So a lot of things to like. So if you're Philadelphia, that says something too. That the Giants have room for improvement, and so does Dallas. And both of them played pretty well yesterday. At least for Giants on one side of the ball. If both those teams are going to play better, if you're Philadelphia, that's why you got to win a game like this tonight. Because if you want to keep up with these teams, things are going to be. I think it's going to be a really strong year in the NFC East.
Yeah, tonight, really interesting game because, Washington plays the Giants next week. The Giants could be 3-0, and that could knock the Redskins to 0-3, which would, for all intents and purposes, that would be a big mountain for them to climb. Let's get your take on a couple other interesting storylines around the league. How about Sam Bradford last night? How impressed were you with him, and what kind of fit do you see him now that you've seen him in the purple that you think he'll be in Minnesota?
I've been on the Sam, I've been on the Sam Bradford bandwagon forever. I've been leading that bandwagon almost. Just when you keep looking at his tape and looking at his numbers and going over that, I wrote an article for Insider a couple of weeks ago that talked about how Bradford he'd had fantastic numbers over his career, and in every place you looked, he never had quality receivers, and he really didn't have a strong running game. And Minnesota's running game, by the way, here's the thing: you're going to know how Minnesota's upset is. They just beat Green Bay, and they're off to a 2-0 start, and the passing game looks fantastic. Their running game is one of the lowest good blocking rates in the league. They were last after week 1, and they'll probably be last after week 2. They're playing terrible there. That will get better now that they've got a passing game going. So now if Minnesota's got that great defense, and Bradford's playing fantastic, 9.2 yards per attempt on Sunday night, that's a great number. If he's playing well, and you've got the passing game going well, and the running game is going to improve, even if Peterson is out for a time, if you get better run blocking and the run game improves, Minnesota could be a powerhouse.
Yeah, that was a really very good performance by him. And I was always not a Bradford hater, but he played above. Now, what happens if they lose Peterson? It looks like he could possibly play this week, but a meniscus injury, maybe 3-4 weeks. They're not rolling him out yet, but what changes from that team if they lose Peterson? Because he hasn't really been a big factor yet.
He's played terrible this year, but again, because they're giving him good run blocking about 20% of their plays, and the league average in good run blocking rate is 35, 38%, somewhere around there. So you're 1 out of 5 times you're giving him good blocking. That's terrible. No back is going to do very well. And not only that, when he's not getting good blocking, it's not like he's getting to the line of scrimmage and maybe a linebacker's beating a center on a combination block. No, people are getting in the backfield and getting him before he gets anywhere. So, but the good news for them is Jerick McKinnon, the backup, who will probably get the bulk of the carries. So maybe not goal line Seattle will get those, but McKinnon will get the bulk of the carries. His history in good blocking yards per attempt, he's been really good in that metric. And he in some cases has been better than Peterson, albeit on a much smaller sample size. So I think if they get their run blocking in order, I think McKinnon's going to be able to carry their running game really strongly. And I don't think Minnesota will really miss a beat, especially if Peterson comes back a little bit later. Maybe it could be a rest thing, and he can be healthy for a late season run.
All right, a couple more quick observations on week 1 from Casey Joyner. We'll get his pick on the Eagles and the Bears in just a second here. You look at another game yesterday that I thought was kind of interesting is forget the fact that the Rams won a game without scoring a touchdown and people, didn't give them a shot at all. The fact that Seattle scored 3 points yesterday. What is the problem with the Seahawks, and will this be an ongoing issue?
They try to coach up their offensive line, and they don't address it via talent, and they don't get things going early. In fact, I was talking to Mike Sandu, he's one of our ESPN insiders. We were talking about this in the preseason and things, and he said that Seattle oftentimes gets off to a very sluggish start. That's just the way that the way their system approaches things. They just tend to get off the sluggish starts. It's just the way they've always been. And again, coaching up the offensive line, it's a risky proposition because if you're just trying to coach them up, and it works sometimes. New England's done it over the years, but it's still a risky proposition. And in the first 2 weeks of the season, they almost lost in week 1, and they did lose yesterday. And they need to get that thing fixed because Wilson's kind of banged up, Baldwin's now banged up, Rawls is banged up. Your skill position players are hurting, so you better get some good blocking together. Because if you don't get good blocking together, now you've got multiple problems, and Seattle could get off to a very slow start, but they might be a thing to where they get healthy by midseason and could do what they did last year.
Yeah, last one for you, Jacksonville. I know in the first week you said there was a lot to like about them. What about after going to San Diego and kind of laying an egg?
They don't tend to match up well against San Diego. It was probably a poorly timed article on my part. It was interesting, though, listening to the broadcast yesterday, a San Diego coach said that every time he looks at the Jaguars, he sees them looking more and more like Seattle. Not Seattle yesterday, but Seattle over the past couple of seasons. He sees more and more of that team doing that. So I think they're going to get better. Their run blocking isn't bad, and I think that was just a bad matchup for them. I think they're a team that as long as things don't fall apart because they're 0-2, and as long as they don't fold their 10 and they can keep their poise about them, I think they're still going to get better as the season progresses. And I think you'll see them. You'll see them. I don't think they'll make the playoffs, but maybe make some playoff noise.
Yeah, it just looked like Bortles struggled a little bit yesterday. He played well last year, and a lot of that could be, they were down so much last year. Was it because he was throwing and playing from behind as opposed to now games a little closer, and they're asking him, to play a little bit closer football?
Yeah, he's still throwing vertical passes. He's still going deep and such. And the thing is, though, is that they had expected the running game to have both Ivory and Yeldon, and I think they expected to have a kind of 1-2 combination because Yeldon's just he's not the guy. He can do some things well, and he's a good change of pace back, but he's not your lead guy. And not having Ivory there for the first couple weeks, I think that really changed the whole dynamic of what they can do on offense because teams just realize we don't have to respect your running game because we know Yeldon can't beat us. But Ivory was top 10 last year in good blocking yards per attempt, so I think if Ivory gets healthy and can get back to what he was last year, I think that might change their offensive dynamic.
Casey Joyner with his pick now for the Eagles and the Bears tonight's Monday Night Football. Jeff Dickerson said everybody in Chicago is picking the Bears. Seems like a lot of people in Philly are leaning towards the Eagles. We got a split. How do you break this tie?
I break the tie by saying I think that Jay Cutler is going to make a lot of mistakes, and I think he's going to make some errors. I didn't like what I saw of him in Week 1, and Wentz was really – it wasn't just Wentz was – not just look at his numbers, you look at his tape and you see how he's handling pass rush pressure and how, again, it's Cleveland, but you saw a really poised quarterback. So I got Philadelphia pulling the upset in this one.
All right, that's Casey Joyner going with the Eagles this week over the Bears in a little bit of an upset. Bears are about a 3-point favorite at home. Casey Joyner at KC Joyner TFS on Twitter, and of course we'll have more on the NFL later on in the week as Casey joins us on Thursdays as well. Thanks, pal.
Appreciate it, man.